Welcome, Amy Gillingham. I had such an extraordinary experience, Amy, a few weeks ago at your farm. The experience you created for us, a group of friends who came to visit your off the grid farm spontaneously and serendipitously. We just came to see your Icelandic sheep and pet them. Was extraordinary. You showed us how to weave, how to dye fabrics. You shared magical stories from your life. And just to be under the full moon at your off the grid farm is such a magical experience. So thank you. So I spontaneously extended you this invitation because you inspired me, and it resonates with my lifestyle as I was born in the countryside in Romania, and I experienced a sort of remembrance of my own roots. And interestingly, your farm is called Wild Roots Farm, right?
Right.
So I remember my mother used to weave also, and we used to bake bread and raise animals, make cheese, all the beautiful things you make. So I thank you for that. I didn't experience that in a while, and that was like soul reconnecting. Well, let's start because that's not all. Like, what really triggered me is some magical drink that you extended to us, the visitors, as we first arrived. Do you know what I have here? Or do you guess what I have here?
The sacred basil tea, maybe?
And
The
that's exactly what I needed. And as I told you, it's part of one of my programs called Nine Seeds for Life. And I tried to grow all these plants, but I never was able to grow holy basil or tulsi. So when you extended me this drink and you said, oh, it's just growing easily at my farm, I was like, well, I have a lot to learn from you. So that's the second reason and the deeper reason why you're here, because probably I have a lot to learn from you, and thank you for that. Let's start with your farm, and if you want to share how is life off the grid, and did you inherit it from your previous generations?
Right. Well, first of all, I love that we're starting it off with honoring the Tulsi and the sacred basil that you have, the plants, the magic of the plants, which is kind of what actually drew me into this lifestyle, was just realizing, I think early on, and probably when I was 19, was gifted a salve with a calendula salve, and some dried raspberry leaf tea. And I was like, wow, I can make this. Like it was kind of the gate opener for the world of plants for me. So I think that that's interesting that that was part of the connection for you too. And so I think I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and and didn't really thrive in the suburban, you know, mowed lawn type of landscape. And uh, and I just always connected with wilder places. So I knew at 18 it was like I need to move on, go explore wild places. And I was fortunate enough to have an internship, and I lived in an off-grid house, and I was like, this is really easy for me. It stripped away all the stuff that I felt was unnecessary from childhood in a way, growing up with all of that. And it's like you're just dealing with your basic needs. Like that's what what you need. Do I need to get water? Do I need to get firewood? Do I need to, my sleep adjusted more to the daylight and nighttime hours. And so it felt really good and for my whole system. So I think when I was like, wow, this is really easy, I didn't really question that I needed something different. So, um, But I will say, just one comment. I love that you said, it reminded you of your childhood because now we do educational programs on our farm. And most of the people that come from Europe have all said the almost identical thing. And it like something opens in them and they remember
Mhm.
like being a child going to visit their grandfather, and someone even from Romania was like, oh my gosh, this feels so much like home. And so I think there's something about those traditional lifestyles that was really um nourishing for the human spirit. I know it was difficult in certain situations, but to have that many people from Europe come through and go, wow, this really resembles something I used to have, and that is not cultivated here in the United States so much anymore. There's small little off-grid farms, and but it was whole communities that worked together. Um, and they needed each other to live that way, to live simply. So,
It
yeah.
sounds nourishing and more um, resetting and normal lifestyle than what we have here with artificial lights. And I'm not saying it's easy, probably it's difficult, many other different aspects.
Mhm.
So I imagine raising children, it's much easier in a way, but much more like from psychosocial aspects might be challenging in other ways. I know you homeschooled you have two kids, right? And you homeschool both of them. Yes.
Yep.
And I saw the results are amazing. Your daughter has her own farm. Actually, you are sitting on the porch of her farm right now. It's a Gale Roots Farm, right?
Yeah, right. So it's Gale Roots Community Farm, spelled Gael, and that is because she feels a real strong connection to our Irish Scottish heritage. I'm Irish, mostly Irish, and my husband's Scottish, and she learned the Gaelic language, and she felt like this is also about reciprocity, which, the Gaels, and I guess my husband said Gael actually means roots in Welsh, which is he's also Welsh. So it's kind of like um or wild. It means wild. So it's also like saying Wild Roots Farm. So it's the Gaelic version of it. And there's reciprocity, with the land and the people. So this is about what we can give, and share and receive. And so it's not um it's a different lens, and I think we have been very conditioned to look through economic lenses of how things, as a resource. But that it's to me, I'd love to change that word resource to relationship. What's our relationship with this planet? Not what resources does this planet have for us, right? So all these gifts, the plants, the animals, the water, these are all relationships to cultivate and develop and learn from. Like that's our greatest teacher.
I
That's part of why I homeschooled, because I was like, look what we have here, And to be honest, and I'll be really honest, like it was so much simpler for me to homeschool, um, because of where we were than packing them up at 7 in the morning and getting them out, and during the winter, and we have a half a mile driveway, we'd have to ski out. So it felt so natural to me, that the outdoors would be the teacher. And I always have said, observe what you can outdoors, because if whatever you can observe out here, you will learn how to figure anything out, because this is the most complex system ever. So if you're observing this, and that's what I wanted them to be able to do, was to learn how to learn, how to you know discover and figure things out, not necessarily to memorize. um, so that's part of why I homeschooled, but I think there were many benefits. It's not to say I didn't worry. There were definitely times where I'm like, oh, am I not, Iris was a late reader. Like, oh, should I, I felt like it's kind of straddling two worlds, because here's this world, that it's about learning and the academics and, and here's this other world that's developing heart and intuition, and it's like, should her brain be at this level? And so I was constantly straddling that, and there were times I doubted myself. If I could go back, I would be like, it's okay. And some other homeschool parents actually said that to me. They were like, don't worry about it. They will be fine. And that was very comforting.
So I understand you had a community of like-minded people around you homeschooling and maybe just spending time together with each other.
Yeah, well, so it was at a time before homeschooling was very popular. Not very many people did it, but there were a handful of people. So we would get together, but this is, we all lived like half hour, 45 minutes away from each other. Um, and the stuff that, so we would do some little things so that they could interact with other kids and, but it wasn't every day. And it, they did, one of the things I wanted was to really be able to have the homeschool kids in the woods and doing like learning together in the woods because we lived in the woods, but I didn't want them to feel isolated, and just us. I wanted them with other kids playing in the woods. So we started a little school called Growing Wild. And a friend of mine who I'd met who had studied with John Young and he'd studied with Tom Brown. So all these naturalist skills came and started this program. And she was here for a year and it was great. And the kids ran around and they played in the woods and then she left and I was like, I don't want this to stop. And so I continued it and learned some of the things from her and we kept going and we'd start with a fire with flint and steel every morning and it'd be from 9 to 3, 2 days a week and they would run in the woods all fall and they had named trees and they knew how to it was just such a special time and Iris actually was just saying she still runs into some of the kids that were a part of that and they're like that was the best part of they have such good memories of it. They were like that was the best part of homeschooling. And I could see the changes in some of the kids from you know, like over the weeks because we also had like 8 symptoms of wilderness that we followed some of these teachings that my friend had taught me. And we could see like them kind of, I don't even know. It's like some of the tension left, and we could pull on that like, okay, are we following these 8 symptoms of wilderness and respecting each other and how we're talking to each other so we could bring in all the other things. It's just about being a kind person while we're playing.
Well, I'm just curious, what are the 8 symptoms of wilderness, or at least two? I don't know if you can share.
Remember, I need my notes. I need my notes. But I think it's health and vitality. I can't even remember them all, but I
I
can send them to you. I have them. I have them, in my folders. Um,
feel
but
like natural rhythms imprint into our biology. That's why I'm such a big proponent of lifestyle medicine and plant medicine because I think this we need this reset, and we are a big biological clock. And when we tune in with the natural clock of our mother, the planet, I think we just our biology works the best and is optimized. And also, what I noticed in your homeschooling room that you showed me was this ancient calendar, a Celtic, I think, a Celtic calendar. And I'm just curious, you observe these traditional ancient festivals and agricultural cycles in your farm life. And so, can you please share how these ancient rhythms weave into your lifestyle and what was, like maybe share one of your favorite ones?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like because our lifestyle became so much, it's about the seasons and that's how we live with the planting season, the harvesting season, the winter season of rest, summer is the busy season. And so there's, between the equinoxes and the solstices and there's these times that are marked on the lunar and solar, calendars that are are significant for marking the holiday. So a lot of different religions, I think, have holidays around similar times. So for me, without going too much into that, I I have always really loved, we've always had a big solstice fire for the winter solstice, which is kind of like this opportunity to get everybody outside in the freezing cold in the middle of winter and burn what we want to let go of from the last year, bring in what we want to bring into and just kind of feast and which is around 21st of December, 22nd, and before Christmas. Um, but my favorite one has always been, well, it's St. Bridget's Day, is one of the, you know, we honor Bridget and who blesses the well. And that's February 2nd. So close to the Groundhog Day is like, is this the first day of spring? Technically, it's celebrated as the first day of spring. And I can always hear, like, after these cold winters, the bird sounds changing. The sunlight feels a little bit different. So we do a really fun feast, for Bridget's, in honor of that and the first day of spring. We just celebrated a really lovely Lunasa, which is August 1st, and it's like the beginning of the harvest time. It's the beginning of the abundance. So we had a big meal and did the bake oven. So we've tried to make that happen, and sometimes, we don't make as big a deal out of it as I want, but I feel like that's sort of my clock and my has become our family traditions.
Mm. Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
It brings so much more meaning to someone's life to connect to nature and these natural rhythms. And I think that's why we feel so starved in cities with artificial lights, because we can't do that. We can't have that imprint into our biology. And coming to your farm seems like a perfect reset. And I'm planning to do it, to make it happen more often for myself at least. But this is for special occasion. But how does a typical farm day look like?
There is not a typical farm day. It's more like a typical season. It's so seasonal. So my farm day in January looks totally different than my farm day right now, and so right now it's a lot about harvesting. Um, the main planting is slowing down. So now I've been, sort of processing food. We've got a lot of abundance. We're still rotating grazing animals, and it's um, it's full, whereas like spring, a typical day feels busy. Like we got a lot of work to do. This is planting the seeds for the whole year. Because when we're planting those seeds, it's for all of the root cellar food. So the cabbages and the turnips and the carrots and the beets and so all of this stuff, the potatoes that we will need for the 6 months of the year that we're not growing. So there's kind of this whole planning out. So it's a busy, busy time. It's lambing season. Um, the snow first melts. It's time to, like, you see what needs to get cleaned up and, um, time to fertilize and compost, spread compost. So every season is so different. Winter is more rest in certain ways, but it's physically still demanding because you're getting firewood and you're having to heat things and hauling hay and hauling water to the cows, and so it's just so different. And I think that's what I love about it, is there is no typical day. I need a constant change. I love change. I'm going to move on to the next project, but now after 30 years of doing this, there's a real comfort in the rhythm that has developed. And I just know when certain things will be ripe and ready for harvest and certain herbs will be ready. So it's like I have this kind of, like, it's part of my DNA now of knowing, like,
What needs to be done?
times. Yeah, the times, when it's okay to leave here and when it's not. And so
Yeah, I remember from my childhood, my father would just know when something needed to be done urgently. even if he wouldn't see that particular piece of land for a while, he would know and remember. He would kind of had this eternal dialogue with the plants or animals or whatever, and he kind of just knew what needed to be taken care of. But that being said, I don't want to idealize this lifestyle because I know it's very demanding. And my sister, who continued to live there, I always talk to her, and she's telling me, well, if you knew what difficulties I have, I mean, it's not so rose as you might think. It's not so rosy. It's it's a lot of work. It's sometimes it's frustrating because we have good years and not so good years. So the fact that you are depending on the mercy of Mother Nature is so overpower. Does it seem overpowering to you? Is it frustrating?
I think, I mean, like this was a really wet May and June, this particular May and June, and it was we got about 18 inches of rain in May and June. So it was hard to get in the ground and get stuff planted and but I think it's just humbling. It's humbling more than anything. And as like I realize after 30 years of doing this, there's still so many factors and there's so much that I don't know. And um, it is more our particular lifestyle is more physically demanding. I would say that, but you know, for me, challenging would be being inside all day. So I mean, there's chefs. We've had chefs come work on our farm when we raised vegetables full time, and they wanted to do an internship for a month, and they were just like, this is brutal. For me, standing in a kitchen for 8 hours a day would be brutal. So it's just who you are. So there's always going to be some people who just will do better outside, and there's going to be other people that long to do something different. So yeah, I don't know that for me, the compromise it was a no-brainer. It was just like, oh, this is this feels great. And there was a time, in my early 20s, my family growing up in Kansas City, I mean, they really thought I was going through a phase, right? Because this wasn't my childhood. But it's nice that, like they came to realize, oh yeah, this wasn't a phase. This is really just how she's, who she is. And I think it's really listening to our soul, you know.
Yeah, I agree. It feels so soul nourishing to be there. So
Oh,
now that we arrived to the topic of the soul, you show me a soul project that you are working on right now. As you mentioned, the educational programs you have there, well, both you and Iris curate there, but particularly you, as you transition to your wisdom years, you show me this um, sweaters or garments that you are weaving from sheep wool and maybe just planning to organize a rite of passage from wise um, women to younger women. Can you please share a little bit about this project?
sure. Yeah, it's been an interesting few years, I think, with COVID and um, just getting older and realizing like, wow, I don't have the strength and stamina that I used to have. Um, and so I actually just was like, what would it be like if I just had like a self-declared sabbatical to just see what it was like not to be doing all the time, not to be working, to actually just create space because I can stay really busy with so much. And what would it be like to not being doing food from seed to table? And fortunately, I sat down with my family and said, pose this question, and they were very supportive of that. And so I took this time because I could feel the shifts, the hormonal shifts. I could also feel the lack of, like strength and gusto that I had when I was younger. And I was like, I know there's a different way for me to move in the next 50 years than I have been moving in these 50 years. So I'm still learning. And I feel like these moments in our life are really important. Like we had a rites of passage for my daughter as she, or initiation and um as she was stepping into, her teens and becoming what it is to be a woman. And I think marking these times is very important. Birth, when a mother becomes a mother for the first time, the birthing process or marriage or, and so this time as an older woman, I just was like, gosh, I feel like I'm just stepping into a an awareness that I I didn't know I had. It was just this again, like an opening. And once you're aware, you can't not be aware. Right. So it was like, wow, this is an interesting time. So I thought about that in terms of, how I have I have five sisters. Four of them are older than I am, and I never heard anything about menopause or this time until I was going through it. I started asking them like, have you noticed? Did you ever notice your hormonal changes, And I think there's confusion around it. And so I feel like it's really a time to honor, for me, it was a time to honor that my children are older. I'm stepping into this new place. So I started making during my year off, playing more with the fibers from the sheep and doing less food. And I was like, maybe I'd just start making stuff. And I started making these triangular shawls and wrapped in the wool that's hand washed and hand carded and hand spun. And we use the dye plants here and then weaving it, and how special that is to wrap yourself in that during that time. So that was part of the idea. I've been, making some shawls, and I'm not quite sure what I'll do with that yet, but I do feel like honoring these stages in our life is really important because otherwise we can feel like something's the matter with us. And even as a teenager, like, why don't I want to, I remember Iris going, I don't know why I don't really want to play with my dolls anymore. I feel bad, And my son, who was, somewhat resistant to a initiation, but I was like, before you go to college, like, is there something we can do, And fortunately, COVID was came at the right time for him, in the sense that we were able to send him on a year-long backpacking trip. So I was like, he didn't want to do any, you know, group or you know, planned initiation. However, I was like, wilderness is the best initiator you're gonna find. And this is really important for you to discover what it is to be a man in our world. And I feel like, nature can do that. So, um, yeah, just to not blow through those times, but to actually take the pause. So that's where the shawls came out of, and I'm still sitting with what to do with them, but I'm glad you're excited about them, and I think it's really, um, it feels really good.
It feels so comforting to wrap yourself in a shawl and just seeing the sheep there. And I think us as women coming to your farm, we were seeking that softness, that energy of the sheep to kind of like soften our experiences as mothers, as as you mentioned, women going through different stages of our lives. I have a client yesterday, she was sharing her daughter had her first period, and she was crying. She's just 11, and she was crying, and she didn't know how to console her and how to explain her. It's such a taboo in our society around breastfeeding, mothering, menopause, and all these transitions in our lives. And we do need more of that. So thank
Yeah.
you for thinking of that and being more in your feminine energy. So, is there any advice that you would offer to a younger version of yourself, or to a young woman that seeks advice from a wise mother?
Well, Um, advice to myself, I think, like I said earlier, I think I probably worried a little more than I needed to about because I was going so against the grain. But that's my nature to just, and I'm very fortunate with that. I think I was just born with that. It's just like, well, does this make sense? And so I would go with what made sense. So I also had home birth before, a lot of people had home births. And so it was just a really interesting, I think it was an interesting thing that I didn't understand was rare. And until now, as an adult, I see that not everybody has, it's not as easy for people to go against the grain and just question something and look into something. And so, um, I would just tell myself, like, don't worry, you don't need to worry, you know.
And
For other people, I think it would be more about really following their own guidance. Like, I think we get into our head and question because there's so, and especially now, and when I was raising my kids, we didn't have computers, phones didn't come out till they were 10, the cell phone thing, so it was very different. So now it's a really different time, but it's also things are moving faster. This is, so this is a really good time to become conscious. And how do we become conscious, you know, faster than being able to, if we're not able to listen to ourself, then it's going to take longer. And trust ourselves, trust our intuition, listen to, you know, be, our soul, because everybody's different and they all have a different purpose. But if we're listening to all the other messages that are being told of what they should do or could do, then that's where it can get really confusing. So I was really blessed to be able to, in those times, move to a cabin in the woods, and I just shut all that off. So I didn't have all that input. So it was easier to listen to myself. So, just somehow being able to monitor that and um, give yourself that space to listen would be my advice. And I think the reality is a lot of people aren't really sure how to listen to themselves anymore.
I think simplifying is the key.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to I mean, that's been a passion of mine from day one. Now that's just part of what my makeup is. Like, I prefer simplicity, and that's not everybody's. So again, that's what worked for me. So it may not work for everybody else. Um, but listen to what does work for you, and I think that, like you said, in some of your childhood and some of the other places, that the lifestyles kind of had some of that woven in, that spaciousness and that time and that grounding. It was woven into the daily routines. So that's the part we're missing. So if we're missing that, how do we replace it with something that is good in this world? And I think everyone can find the way to replace it for themselves. They'll find what works for them. I mean, for my sister, not, I have, like I said, five sisters, and two of them have been here to visit because off-grid cabins are not very enticing to the other four, or other three, I should say. Um, so everyone has, different, and I love that. I love that.
I'm gonna ask you a philosophical question because you seem the ideal person to ask this. Is self-reliance completely possible or is it an illusion? What do you think? Because you live off grid.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people say that when they come to visit our farm, they're like, "Oh, you're so self-sufficient." And when my husband's father, got ill, we took him in and we took care of him, and I was like, "Wow, this is like, we're without help and support, this does not feel self-sufficient." And I think that that is really part of what Iris and Roan grew up hearing, was like, it's about community. And community is also a challenge. My husband says the only thing wrong with community is people. But that's where we grow, right? That's also like we need it. We need to have that because that's what pushes us to grow and learn, and that's the challenge. And that's part of our, what my daughter's doing here on this farm. So a farm came up for sale next to our farm, and she didn't want to see it developed, so she raised money, got some, buyers, and then she's leasing it from them and trying to start a nonprofit community farm that's really about a hub for community. Um, so even though we could live back there on our own, do our own thing, and have the illusion of self-sufficiency, no, I don't think it's really realistic. It's about community stepping in. Right now, we have a neighbor helping put a sod roof on our community barn space that we're building because Iris is a little scared of heights and I'm not as strong anymore. And I get to sit here and have this, conversation with you. So I think community is really, really important. And I would say it's not limited to human community. Our community has been with the land and the plants and the animals around us. And that's the thing, like how do we merge it? It's not, um, I feel like that's something I'm still trying to figure out the balance of, is like the human community and the land that we're on. And I think so much of our human traditions and even rituals have come from the land. Like if you look at these different people around the world, some of their rituals are based on when certain things are flowering or fruiting, or the times of the year when it's planting. And so it's very connected, and that's the piece that I'm hoping we can we can be the bridge to, is to help people remember that the community is beyond the, humans walking around. It's like this is all speaking to us. So that's the piece that I feel like is gonna be the most sustainable, self-sufficient community, is one that has that balance. Um, so yeah. And I've just seen how that is, like I said, a gateway
Mm.
for people, brings
You
people together.
you definitely made us remember. So this is something so magical. That's why I was like, I have to talk to her because you cannot be someone more fit for this podcast, wise and wild. So um,
I feel like I've changed, like, my preference now. When I look out at something, my eye has become more drawn to wild. When I see something that's been very manipulated by by people, or very controlled environment, I feel the constriction in my own body. Like it's really interesting. And that was very different than when I came from Kansas City and everyone had mowed lawns. And, I came here and was sort of like trying to mow or keep, it's like that conditioning is really in us. So what people are gravitate to, they're used to, but I think there's something cellular and in our, you know, in our cells that wakes up when we are in contact with that kind of wild energy.
it's such a powerful experience to be in community and commune with nature because that opens the opportunity to commune our inner nature and just reconnect to who we are. We are so conditioned from our upbringing, from being functional in this society who's sometimes so dysfunctional. So thank you for curating that experience. And is this for everyone? Who should find you?
Yeah, I love that question. Who should find me? I think of all, that's a great question, because I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, I think I have an idea of who would benefit the most from this, but I think that's just me in my head. And I think this is part of our mission here, and what we're doing is just to create a space that's open to everybody to have exactly what you're talking about, you experience, where you got to come, reground, be nourished, and and remember, and then go back and do your work in the world. And so I think as we are doing this project, it doesn't necessarily just mean, we thought maybe for activists, because my husband does a lot of activist work and they meet in inner city hotels, making these important decisions about the environment, or, you know, so it doesn't need to just be um, for folks from the city. I think there's also a lot of local people. We're in a rural area in New York, and a lot of people aren't that familiar with the ecosystem around them, with what plants are edible. We get a lot of people showing up for these wild edible workshops, or that are just learning, what's edible in their backyards. So it's opening that door for everybody. But I think probably it's the people that have the most curiosity and the most willingness to be open to a different way of moving in the world. And I think a lot of people are realizing that, like, they want to move differently and they're not really sure how. And it can be in like little baby steps. So this farm here, Gale Roots, is on Cattail Road, and it's a really good opener for people. And we joke that, my driveway is a half a mile long down to Wild Roots Farm, and it's a whole different off-grid experience, as you got to experience, very different. And I say that's for the people who are ready to go deeper.
Only to take that driveway, it's an initiation in itself, because that that my friend Hildur kept the dust, the red dust from that driveway on her wheels without washing her cars, just to remember the experience. So I think magic is the word there, because we don't know how this worked, but we met, and I'm very grateful for this. And we have so many things to share, and I just hope we'll have a long-lasting friendship from now on, and we'll keep talking about plans and projects and rites of passage. And I cannot wait to see you flourishing in your wisdom years, and support that as much as I can, and support each other, because I think we women need community more than anyone else. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so honored to know you. It was so fun to have you all here, and I'm open to see what the wind blows in, what gets planted here. So,
Well, I wish you the best, and I can't wait to see you again. Thank you.
okay. Thank you so much. Such a fun interview.